Welcome to the session that is going to influence generations to come. I'm Laura Heisman, Vice President of Communications here with GitHub. 20 years ago, I was enamored with everything coming out of Silicon Valley, and I moved here. I wanted to be part of something that was revolutionary. I found a passion focusing on communications and technology. But now that I'm at GitHub, I've never been closer to technology, where we're building the future. While I was growing up, though, technology was nowhere in my life. Now that I'm a mother of two, and I have a child that wants to rule the world, I want my kids to not only use technology, but better yet, be tech builders. I have the honor today of chatting with Fiona Tan, SVP of Customer Technology at Walmart, the technology division innovating new solutions at Walmart stores and Walmart e-commerce. Fiona has spent the last 25 years in the field of technology, having worked at Ariba, Tibco Software, and at Oracle. You all heard from Fiona just a short while ago on the main stage in her session, Built to Grow. While tech wasn't part of my childhood, Fiona grew up where STEM was an integral part of her life. Now raising two children of her own, she is encouraging her children to take the path of technology. Imagine what the tech space would be like if more women were involved in technology from the inception of technology. Today, we're going to dig into how to get more women and our future children to build this future. Fiona, please welcome back to the stage. There is no better topic than talking about future generations.
Yes, indeed.
First, though, let's talk about you and how you got here. Just tell us about your role at Walmart and how you got to be where you are today.
Sure. Yes. So, as I was mentioning before, I lead the customer technology team, and it's something that is something I'm very near and dear to my heart. Is that being able to build technology that impacts everyday people, right? It's one thing when you work. You talked about some of the enterprise software companies that I worked at before. It was a little different, right? Now, when I do something at work, you release features like my mom has an opinion about it, right? So that's the kind of difference between working at a enterprise software company and working at a place like Walmart. But I find it really exciting. It's obviously kind of a passionate work for me as well, and so yeah, I'm enjoying it.
So how did you end up in a technical career?
Yeah. So I think growing up. And I'm from Malaysia and Singapore, and so how many here have watched Crazy Rich Asians? Yeah, a few of you. Yeah, so I'm not one of them, right? So I'm on the other 99% of the population. But yeah, so I grew up in both Malaysia and mostly in Singapore, and one of the things that kind of growing up that was a little bit different was just the emphasis, just culturally, around math and science, right? So I think growing up, one of the things that was very prevalent for us was that the impression is, or your parents will tell you that if you don't know what you want to do, right, it's fine, but whatever you do, you've got to have a good grounding in both math and science. And so you'd have a lot of my classmates that did a lot of the math and science classes, some of them are doctors, some of them are lawyers, and it doesn't matter because, again, I think their emphasis was you can do anything if you have math and science. So it's a little bit different from that perspective. So it was not a stigma for girls to like math. I mean, you're expected to like math. In fact, it's better if you do, right? So I kind of grew up in that environment, but I didn't immediately think that I was going to be a technologist. That was sort of something I stumbled upon. I went to school at MIT, so there was a good chance that I was going to do something in technology. There's not too many other majors outside of technology at MIT. But I took my first computer science class, and I realized this is the thing for me. I mean, this is great. You get to solve puzzles, and they actually pay you a bunch of money to do that. I mean, what's better than that, right? So that's how I started. Very altruistic, as you can see. But it's been a good career, and I've really enjoyed it. And frankly, you talk about telling our children, and when I talk to girls, I mean, I do mention that. I mean, it's not a bad thing that you can actually make a good living doing something really fun like coding, right? So anyways, that's how I kind of got into it.
And how have you been encouraged all these years to develop your own career, and what advice would you give to others?
Yeah, so I think I think I was very fortunate. I had some good mentors, kind of coming out in my career, and for all the women out there, it's great if you have a woman role model and a mentor. But men can be great supporters, and in my case, certainly my two mentors, and one that I still he's the guy I go to if I'm ever thinking about doing something different in my career, ideas that I want to bounce on and around and. So these were the two gentlemen, VJ and Jerry Hell, that really helped me throughout my career, sort of looked out for me, sort of pushed me along and said, I think you can do this bigger thing. And that's a lot of the, sometimes it's just having somebody who sort of believes in you, kind of telling you, yeah, you can do this, right? And that's been good.
That's great. Now let's bring it back to where you are today. What's the role that you play in diversity and inclusion at Walmart?
Yes, so certainly, again, a big passion project of mine. And the one nice thing about working at the world's largest company is we've got a pretty good platform to be able to do that. And so I'm actually serving on the president of Doug's Diversity and Inclusion Council. And we do focus on trying to ensure that we're doing everything that we can as a company to make sure that we build an environment that's inclusive. And a lot of it is how do you include those practices into your everyday life, right? So a lot of the, if you're doing HR, performance reviews, et cetera, right? How do you make sure that you include diversity and inclusion as part of the process so that it's not like something to the side? It has to be sort of integrated in everything that we do, hiring, performance reviews, and a lot of the culture around it being not only good, but also good for business. So it's a lot of that focus around diversity and inclusion. And like I said, in a company like Walmart, it's nice that we have the resources, and we've also made certain commitments publicly around what we're going to try to do to ensure that we are building an inclusive environment, that we are able to attract and retain the best talent that's diverse, right?
And then you and I were chatting, and you do more than just what's within Walmart.
Yeah.
So if you can, share a little bit
Sure.
more about what you're doing outside of Walmart.
Yeah, so I think the other thing that I'm pretty focused on, and we were chatting a little bit about this, is a program like with Girls Who Code. So I'm quite involved with that program. Walmart actually does sponsor it, and I'm an executive sponsor for that. But a lot of it's around getting girls to be interested in technology and coding, and getting them also to stay in math and science at an age where they're sort of starting, when, we were talking about your daughter, and she's 9, isn't she?
Yep.
And, when they're younger and they're like, they think their parents are great and they actually listen to us. And then there's a time when they get to middle school and they'll actually listen more to their friends than they will to us, right? So we want to make sure that we give them a good grounding in terms of what's important, what's great, and what's cool about math and coding and all that during those formative years when they're sort of just about ready to not listen to you. So anyways, with the program that I'm involved with, Girls Who Code, it's targeting kids both at that age as well as all through high school. And so it's working with them over the summer, and it was neat. We had an internship, sort of like a summer program that Walmart sponsored, but we had the girls show up. In the first week, you could tell at least some of them, clearly they did not sign up for this on their own, right? Some parent probably put them up to it.
Parents don't do that.
Yeah, I know. And it was, it's tough. It's 8 weeks of your summer, right? So it's a good portion of your summer. And they came in without any programming experience. But the thing that was neat was that at the end of it, I was also there, kind of the graduation ceremony, and it was such a big change, right? Everybody was so thrilled. They were so proud of themselves, all the things that they learned, all the things that they were able to do. And it was neat to see them graduate. And, again, I was talking to them. I'm like, a lot of you are going to college, right? How many of you are going to take up computer science? And it was thrilling to see everybody, not everybody, but almost everybody put up their hand. And so that was neat. And I feel like that's more of what we have to do, is just make sure that we can encourage girls kind of when they're, in that age where they're up for some, where they're still a bit interested in listening a little bit to kind of consider computer science. And, we were talking yesterday too, right? It's, when you have programs that are more geared towards girls, you can look at what actually appeals, right, to girls. And it's different between girls and boys, right? we're talking about a lot of robotics, and it's fun, right? And it's a neat program, and but girls may or may not be interested in building a robot that's going around and banging other robots and destroying them in the process, right? So how do you create opportunities for girls to do something that's fun and maybe appealing to them? And in a way, with Girls Who Code, that's what we tried to do. Is we actually had them come in. They designed websites and they were talking about topics that were interesting to them, right? And so they actually ended up doing probably the same amount of, it's coding. It maybe not as physical with robotics, but they learned a lot about coding, and they got to really put their heart and soul into it, and actually came out feeling really empowered. So that was actually really, really cool. Enjoyed that.
But I definitely hear the life lesson there that if you have kids that are in elementary school, that is a good time to make sure that they're hearing math and science are important, so that when they get to middle school and the influence of friends, it doesn't make them stop loving math and science.
Right, right.
That's great. Now, let's talk about the importance of girls and women in tech and AI and STEM.
Yeah.
Today's workforce only has about a fourth of women in STEM roles. Why do you think that is, and what can we do?
Yeah, I wish I knew and wish I had all the answers, right? But I think part of it's a pipeline problem, and we talked a little bit about, girls getting turned off of math and science and kind of going different directions. So that's the pipeline, because if we don't have them at the middle school and high school age, they're not going to be taking, not going to be studying computer science in college. It means that, we've got no pipeline coming out, right? So we need to make sure that we do everything we can to ensure that that pipeline is strong. It's a lot of parental, whatever we can do to impart that onto our kids. It's also a little bit of it's also the education system, right? Making sure that, again, there's an emphasis on math and science and, ability to offer things like computer science in high schools, and making sure that there's that opportunity as well for women. And then I think when you get into the workplace, it's how do you make sure that we're also looking at developing women and really other diverse populations as well, giving them the right opportunities and making sure that there's support and encouragement and that they feel included, right? I think one of the other things that we're doing that's near and dear to my heart is a returnships program. So again, this is for women and men who might have taken some time off for family reasons. Maybe you took some time off to go raise your child for a little while, and it's intimidating to come back to the workforce, right? And so what if we have, we have internships for college students, so what if we had a returnship, right, for people coming back to work? Because this is an amazing group of people, right? They have had experience. They're mature a little bit already. They've run a household, and they just want a chance to come back. And if we actually took advantage of that, I think we could have, a really nice group of women that could return back to the workforce. So how do we put together a program that's going to help them with that? Because talking to women, that's usually some trepidation around coming back, and then it's a chicken egg thing. It's like, oh, I don't think I think it's passed me by, and then you're a little nervous, and then the next thing you know, it's like years, and you're like, forget it, right? But if we have a program that can help, I think that might help, And so it's like the pipeline has to be good. I think we have to be very purposeful about developing, managers, training managers, directors, whatever, VPs, to just make sure that we're developing the talent while we're in there. And then how do we look at bringing people back into the fold?
Yeah, I couldn't be in more agreement. I don't know how many of you know, but GitHub itself is very involved with some organizations about women that have left the workplace and now are returning.
Yeah.
And it sounds like something that you're involved in as mothers. And we talk to a lot of other mothers, I'm sure, at drop off for your kids. That is a super important thing,
right,
so that it's not past the time, no matter where you are in your career or lifespan.
Exactly right.
During your main stage session earlier today, you were talking about AI. Why is it critical for future generations to actually be involved in AI specifically?
Yeah, so I think artificial intelligence, it's been around for a while. I remember when I was in school, that was a big thing as well. But I think at that time we were more, we were a little bit limited by just the compute power and the availability of data, right? I think that's where we've really been able to see a lot more advancements recently, is just having the compute capability and also the training data that's around, right? So I think the field is growing, and there's tremendous opportunity. And so part of it's just the opportunity, right? It's like you want to make sure that the opportunity is similarly available to the entire population, not just one group, right? So I try to encourage women because that's a field that's booming, it's growing. Again, you make a good living, but it's an exciting opportunity to just be a part of. And then I think there's the other part too, right? Which is that algorithms are not generally biased by themselves, right? But if you have algorithms, and especially I think more so when you have machine learning, right? When you have training data which may or may not be slightly skewed, and then if you have the population that's only not diverse, that's sort of training the algorithms, it can actually, this unconscious bias can definitely seep into the algorithms, and if you're depending on them to make decisions for you, it becomes even more critical. So we want to make sure that there are checks and balances, right? And the easiest way to do that is just have a diverse population, right? It's ideas that are diverse. It's, again, the checks and balances that come in just from having different people looking at it with different, different ideas. It's, we've talked about, actually I was at Grace Hopper a couple of weeks ago, and we had a speaker at the Technical Executive Forum, and she was talking about face recognition with AI, and that's the thing, is the training data is such that it recognizes white males really well, but like African American females like really poorly. And you wouldn't think, and it's technology that's available, and it's considered like the best face recognition tech out there, and it has some glaring gaps, right? So if you had developers that were, say, African American females working on it, well, that would never do with it, right? So that's a lot of why we want to make sure it's not just women, definitely women, but just that diverse populations get involved in it, because we're creating this really cool technology, but it could, it would be just not as rich, right? And just from an impact perspective, if it was just not diverse.
And you have, I'm sure, plenty of opportunity talking to women that are figuring out what to do with their careers. So AI is one of them, but are there other areas that you would recommend or suggest that are great, maybe emerging markets or just strong areas where women can really make an impact?
Yeah, absolutely. I think certainly, AI and data science. I find there are more and in talking. My good friend was used to lead the data science group at Walmart, and I know there's a women in data science conference, for example, at Stanford. So I think there's definitely interest for more women to go into data science, and it's a great field. I think some of the things that women are generally better at, being very organized and analytical from that perspective, and depending on data, it's a good field to go into. But then really around technology, right? The nice thing about being in the tech space is that there are a whole bunch of different roles just being involved in technology. It's lovely to have more women in the development community, because you're obviously developing the technology that is being used, but you also have program managers, product managers that are helping define the roadmap for the products, the UI UX designers that help ensure that we have these wonderful experiences for our customers. So there's a variety of roles within technology. I think, and I still am I'm convinced, right, that we have absolutely the capacity for math and science. There's no doubt about it. And then on top of that, I think women have really great organizational skills, right? I mean, look, the fact of the matter is, no matter what, we're all, whether you're managing, however your career is, whether you're a developer or you're further up in your career path, you manage all of that, plus you manage your household, right? That's a given. So the fact is, I think that we're pretty organized, we time manage well, and those are all great skills to have and to be really successful in the tech field. So I feel like we have all the building blocks. We just need a bit of confidence, a little bit of maybe role models to look up to, and somebody to tell you that you can do it and stick with it, right?
Well, I can see by the audience that you are a role model for a few younger people that are here. So that's a start.
Yes, that's a start.
So now let's move into, I think, a topic that's also near and dear is our kids.
Yeah.
And you were raised in Singapore, and probably, from what I understand, a different experience than raising kids here in Silicon Valley. I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah. So yes, indeed, I grew up in Singapore. Actually, both my parents are teachers, so education was obviously very important. It was always within the family, and I raised my kids differently, but I found that their experience in school, especially my daughter, was a little bit different. Right. So I mentioned to you before, was just around. It's a couple of things, right? It's the level of math, I think, in Singapore versus here is a little different. And also just, again, back to the stigma around girls not liking math and it's not cool to like math. I mean, it's sad because there's a lot of social, even movies that sort of kind of talk about that, right? I think there's, what is that movie? There's a girl and she's actually, you know, very, very smart and she's actually very good at math. But she changes the grade on her math test to a D so that the guy next to her won't think that she's a geek, right? And I'm like, that's terrible, right? We should not be giving that message to our daughters. They should be absolutely proud that they got an A. In fact, an A plus on their math test, right? So that was a lot of it when I was when my daughter was growing up, was just encouraging her and making sure that she felt that it was absolutely more than okay to be good and to enjoy math and science, and so kind of giving her that confidence to be good, and it was okay. Even if her friends didn't like it, it was okay to be different, and it was okay to like math and science. So a lot of it was just kind of being in front of it and trying to help her along, and so that was I've got one daughter. I've got one son too. I've got one daughter. So my goal was making sure that she went into technology, and she's actually at Harvey Mudd College. She's studying chemical engineering. So I feel like I did good, 100%.
Yes, yes, yes. All right, so I'm going to ask you for some advice. My daughter right now, she is 9. Like I said, she wants to rule the world. But she thinks technology is her device. And she doesn't understand what there is that makes everything that she uses on that device.
Right.
What type of advice do I give to her? How do I get her more involved in, but you can actually be a part of what you're touching or playing or whatever it is that you're doing on your device?
Yeah. No, I think first off, it's great to hear that she wants to rule the world. I think we need more girls like that, right? And I think certainly, if nothing else, just encourage that part of it. And so I would say that there's some things that besides the tech part, right? I think for girls, this is again the other thing about me growing up was I played a lot of tennis growing up. I played competitively as a junior and I played in college, and that's another thing that I think is super important for kids in general, but I think even more so for girls is, you mentioned your daughter is in karate and she's actually really good at it, right? I would encourage you to continue to kind of encourage her to be good at that, just to continue to do that, because I think it really does a lot in terms of her confidence building. And over time, maybe it's time management, it's learning to deal with the other competitors, right? And I think that's sort of the around the tech part, but it's super important, especially for girls. I would definitely encourage you to do that. And then I think in terms of the tech part, I think it's, I think you're kind of doing that. It's like, just ask every once in a while. It's like, oh yeah, that game does that, but wouldn't it be cool if you could actually go in and I don't know, have a cheat that goes and gets a lot more of whatever it is that you want, right? I mean, actually the games nowadays, I don't quite understand some of the games that the kids play, but it's like, okay. But, maybe encourage her to think about, wouldn't it be kind of cool if there's a way that you could go in and program it so that you could get more of this whatever XYZ thing that you want, and slowly kind of yeah, and I could kind of help you with that. I could point you to how you could do that, and maybe keep it sort of at the back of your mind that there's more beyond just the app that they're playing with. Or it's like, actually, it's kind of cool. You could actually design your own app, and wouldn't that be neat?
Any advice for the people here in the audience on what to do? So I think about my son. He's almost 14, a true teenager. And he has the pleasure of taking a Minecraft class. I don't know how many of you have kids that have done that, but it's now an actual class in middle school. And but Minecraft has been brilliant in building education classes around their games. And so when I think about her in elementary school, is there something that to start or something that she can do so she's not waiting until middle school, just based on your earlier advice? Because I want to make sure that it's part of her DNA.
Yeah, and I think, I think some girls are interested in Minecraft. If she is, by all means, I think it's kind of a cool game to introduce kind of some amount of coding or thinking about coding while you're playing. But I also think, it's something where it's never really too late to start. And so even if she's not really coding when she's I don't think it's a big deal if she's not coding in middle school yet. And I think in high school, though, if you could kind of start encouraging her to think about it some more, I think that's okay. I don't think it's too late. I mean, we've got women that are, going to boot camps and learning to code at a later age too. That's great. But I think the things that you're doing already are good. Just kind of encouraging her to kind of stick with it, and encouraging her to rule, that she wants to rule the world. I think that's the coolest part, and I definitely would double down on that.
Yes, yes. My mother calls her payback.
Yeah.
So you were talking about your daughter's own interest in technology. You were talking about her encouragement of math and science.
Yeah.
Are there other things that you did, even that were, like you were mentioning my daughter does karate, but are there things that you did with your daughter to keep her in a more fun, spirited, not just
Yeah.
homework, but how did you keep her interested?
Yeah, so I think that's the other thing I found. I think with girls is that they like to see the practical application of what they're studying. So whether it's chemistry or it made it more real for her if she could be a little bit more hands-on with it. And so it's interesting when she was looking at colleges. That was one of the things that actually came to light. She looked at a couple of different universities, and she actually picked the one where it was more of a practical sort of experiential learning. And I found that as she was going along, that was always the thing that she enjoyed about being in school, and sort of some of the labs and projects where she actually got to see the application of what she was learning. And so I kind of helped her with that. I also one of the things that we did, and maybe this is why she wants to go into chemical engineering now, but when she was going through high school and she was in chemistry, and I was like, you know what, I could go back and try to remember all my chemistry, or I could get you a tutor. And so one of the things I did was I did get her a tutor, but we found her one that was just truly inspiring, right? So this is, Ogana was her name. She was a postdoc at Stanford. She was in the Olympics for volleyball, and she was just brilliant and athletic and amazing. And my daughter just loved chemistry after that, right? So I think sometimes it's also, if I guess if in school they're not getting everything that they need, and sometimes it's just hooking them up with somebody that's really good in that field, that whether it's a tutor or just a mentor or somebody who can help and they can look up, and sometimes somebody that's a little bit closer to the age than we are, right, can be more inspirational. And I think that's really that's my daughter's love for chemistry, is just having worked with Ogana for a couple of maybe a couple of semesters, and that's kind of really helped her with sort of the choices that she's made. And it's interesting how that happened.
It's funny, I think back to my own personal story. I was in probably middle school, maybe early high school, and I had a chemistry class, and my teacher said to me one day, "You're really doing well in this class, but I don't know why."
Yeah.
And it was one of those, I could memorize it, I could learn all of it, but the theories around it, if you weren't tested on the theories, you were tested on the facts.
Right.
And I look back at that and go, she didn't encourage me at all.
Oh, yeah.
It actually made me want to stop taking chemistry after that.
Yeah, that's too bad. But yeah, sometimes it's actually looking out for those opportunities. And I think the other thing I realized was that, for our own kids, right, for them, it's not always whatever mommy says is not always the best. But if somebody else can tell them in a way that resonates, so how do you surround them with people that are going to help lift them up? So it's a whole village, really.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And so for the kids that you work with, and for girls who code, when they ask you for what do I need to know or anything of that subject, what are you really saying to them? What should they be focused on or thinking about?
Yeah, I think part of it is also, obviously I always focus on the whole math and science part, but I tell them also, be constantly curious, always, wanting to learn. And I also tell them, hey, look, when you go to college, don't shy away from humanities classes, right? The fact is you're going to need to communicate. In the real world, you're going to have to work with people, and you're going to have to present. You're going to have to, maybe it's asking for money. Maybe it's, talking about, what you are doing, right? So it's like, make sure that you continue to make yourself well-rounded. Take the psychology class so you can understand how people think, right? Take the communications class, take the finance class, take the economics class. Really try to have a well-rounded education. So that's what I try to tell them. Of course, I say focus first. Make sure that you're a computer science major first, and then surround yourself with all these other classes.
And for people here in the audience, is there an opportunity, would you say, if they have kids, how do they get their kids involved in some programs like this? Or how do they themselves get involved in something?
Yeah, no, I think there are many other programs out there that are really worthy. I think definitely however you can get involved, whether it's with the school, and Girls Who Code actually does work with schools, but there are other, like I said, there are a lot of other programs. Get involved, and I think with girls, sort of take a look at what really would appeal to them, right? So again, I think there used to be just mostly robotics, but now there's other opportunities in terms of how you can introduce technology to your children and find out what resonates best with them. It's not a one size fits all, but it's kind of looking out and being sort of purposeful, and something that works for one child may not work for another. So kind of looking for ways in which you can inspire them to be interested in the tech world.
That's great. And then I'm going to take it back to your daughter and just, I guess I'm asking you to go down memory lane a little bit of the comparison of where you grew up in another country and then here in California. Really, what the question is, what do you really see as what hit you at that moment when you were younger, and then what kind of thing would you want to share with your daughter or others that was that moment for you that tech is it?
Yeah. So I think for me, the tech is it part probably came when I was in college, right? I mean, I think I always knew that, growing up, and I'm sure, people have different preferences, but I knew that I would much, much rather work on a math problem than write an English paper, like any time of the day, right? I mean, my real favorite subject was PE, but after PE, it was math, right? So I knew that about myself, and I think, like I said, I think the thing was that I grew up in an environment where that was completely okay, right? So I think with my daughter, it was realizing that that was not quite the environment that she was growing up in, but making sure that she felt supported, and ensuring that she had, again, a lot of the support that came from both parents in terms of how you're going to grow up and still be good and enjoying math and science. So that's a lot of what I did. And honestly, also, I think growing up in Singapore a little bit differently than here, I think I had, in my mind, I had this thought that I was always wanting to go. I wanted to go to the US to go to college, right? So I had this goal of coming here. And I think sometimes, I tell her it was very different. When I first came to this country, it was the first time I ever stepped foot in this country. I hadn't visited any colleges. I mean, that was just not anything that we had the opportunity to do, right? Whereas when she was looking at colleges, right, we went and visited a bunch. She got to do like overnight stays and really figure out which school was going to be best for her. And I think she made a good choice in going to Harvey Mudd. But when I was doing it, it was a little bit different, right? And you make the best of it. And frankly, I think it worked out well. I went to 2 schools that I enjoyed, and so some of it's like some of it's very similar, and some of it is quite different. The other thing is, nowadays in college, the thing that I really enjoy is that they have an opportunity to go do summers abroad or semesters abroad where they're really exposing themselves to other cultures as well and learning from that. So she spent the summer in China, in Beijing, doing one of her engineering courses there, but also taking Chinese and some of the culture classes there. And so it's pretty neat. So some of the experiences that I think kids have nowadays that were not quite as prevalent when we were in college, and I've been trying to encourage them to take advantage of all that. I mean, it's nice to see, right? Even with GitHub, looking at the countries where the greatest number of increases in terms of source code commits, it's neat to see that there's a lot of countries out there that are beyond what we're doing here. So it's very global, and it's great to see our kids kind of growing up in a more global community and understanding and being more part of it.
Yes. And with the folks that you work with on the diversity and inclusion committee at Walmart, are you learning other things from them about their kids and what they're doing to get them to think about tech and their future?
Yeah, I think we talk about it a little bit. Obviously, Walmart is always going to be a retail company first. We obviously depend a lot on tech to differentiate, and it's all good. But I think a lot of them are also thinking about what's great for their children, and obviously there are other worthy careers besides technology. But I've obviously got a bias. But yeah, we do talk about how do we make sure that whether our daughters want to come in and work in merchandising, or if they want to work in technology, if they want to work in finance, that they feel like they are in an environment that's inclusive, and that where they feel like it's fair, and that they're going to be set up for success. And so that's the environment that we want to build within the company, so that it's inclusive wherever it is that women or other diverse groups join, and they're going to feel like they have, every opportunity available to them to succeed.
And so my last question for everybody in the audience, what should they go all home and tell their kids about technology and the importance of technology as we think about our futures?
Yeah, I think, the first part is that technology is fun, right? I think really a lot of it's, again, I talk about is solving puzzles, and it is fun. I think the other thing that's important is, tech nowadays, it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere, right? Your grandparents are using technology. The babies are swiping at stuff, right? So the fact is that you want to be, it's that much more critical for us to be involved in the creation of tech, because it's being used by everybody. And that's why I feel like it's got to be everybody for everybody, right? It can't just be one group, where maybe before you could say, hey, look, mostly it's an enterprise play, and it's not that exciting. But now everybody is using technology. So I would encourage them to think a little bit more, as you were saying, a little bit more about the tech that they're using. Kind of go, what do you think about that? What if we could change that? Would you like to change that? This is how you could change that. Let's download the iOS program. But what I'm saying, it's kind of leading them along to think about the technology that they're using, and kind of go, this is it'd be great for you to be involved in, because this is something that you are using. You're so involved in it already. Wouldn't you like to create it, right? So that's what I'd like to do.
That's great. Thank you. I know that my daughter was very interested in being here today and is going to be watching the replay. So she's going to hear all of this directly from you.
Yes, go rule the world.
And I hope all of you are inspired for your kids too. Thank you so much, Fiona.
Thank you. Appreciate it.